This tutorial is to give you a workaround for an issue with creating discussions in Canvas. In Canvas, you can only apply one due date to any given assignment, which creates an issue if you have a discussion that really has two due dates. A lot of discussions, you want to have a due date for an initial post, so there's required time by which all students need to make their first post to a prompt, and then you have a second deadline by which all students need to reply to one another. And of course, if students don't meet that first deadline, then there's no posts available for other students to reply to, and so it's really important that you have students meet both those deadlines. They need to get their initial posting on time, and then of course they need to make any replies that they're required to make before the deadline for the assignment. Because Canvas does not allow you to apply two deadlines to any given assignment, you've got to find some other workaround to make sure that students are alerted to when their first post is due and then when their responses are due. So I'm going to show you one way that I figured out how to do that. There are other ways using the calendar or other features in Canvas, but here's one way I found that actually works pretty well and helps me easily track when students are submitting things. And so what you're looking at here on the screen is a module from one of my recent courses where I use discussions for each module. And so you can tell I've got information there with content pages about reading that they're going to need to do, a quiz that they can use to practice and make sure they know the content, an assignment that they'll complete during this module, and then right in the middle, a discussion. And you can already see I've got two different assignments for this discussion. This icon here indicates that this is the discussion. This is where they'll post their initial reply to my prompt and their replies to one another. And then this icon indicates I have this set up as an assignment. So it is something that will show up on their to-do list, and it is something that will show up in the gradebook because I have it set up as an assignment. So let me just show you really quickly what I've done here is I create an assignment for the initial post so I can set the deadline for that. If I open up the assignment, you can see it's very simple. What I'm telling them is that the initial post is due by a certain time and that they should go to the full assignment as the place where they're going to submit that initial post. So this is really just acting in some ways as a placeholder, but a placeholder with a deadline, so it'll show up on their to-do list and prompt them to finish that initial post. You can see here it's not worth any points if I open it up so you can see a little bit more how I've got this structured. The assignment's not worth any points. It's included in the discussions category so that it can stay together with the other discussion assignments, and then I have it as complete or incomplete. So there's no grade, but I will be able to provide a check mark or an X depending on whether or not they complete this assignment on time, and then I set the deadline for when I want that initial post to be due. All right, so that's how I've set up that first assignment. And then, again, this points them to the second assignment, which is the discussion itself. And in the discussion itself, I give the description of the prompt, what I want them to do, and tell them when that first prompt should be, and then also a description of their responses and what I want their responses to be, and when the responses are due when the responses to one another's posts are due. And if I set this up, open this up to edit, you can see that I have this set up again as a graded discussion. I have mine set up into groups, right? And it's included in the discussions category, worth 30 points. And I've said here's the deadline, kind of the end of the discussion. So the way I have this set up for my students is that by Saturday morning at 8, they need to have their initial post. That was the deadline of the assignment. And then by Monday at 8 a.m., they need to have their responses to one another posted. So I've got that set here as the deadline. So I've actually got, again, two assignments. One is the discussion itself, and one is another assignment. That's just really a placeholder so I can have a deadline in there. And that's what I've titled initial post. So I've got slightly different titles, but hopefully they're clear enough that students will know that these are linked together. Let me just quickly show you what this looks like in the gradebook. So you can see what I would see. I've got the gradebook set up so that I'm only showing the discussions assignments, so it's a little bit neater. But you can see here, I've got a column for the initial post for every discussion, and I've got a column where I actually grade their responses. And so I can put a check mark or an X depending on whether or not they meet that deadline of submitting their initial post on time. But I'm not giving them a grade yet, right? I save that in the grade for that both their initial post and their response are still kept together in one assignment, right? That is the discussion assignment. So that's what it looks like. And it's pretty easy. As I go through, I can check right after the deadline, and I'll see a little icon here indicating whether or not they've submitted something. And so it's really easy for me to go in from the gradebook and add check marks or X's. That makes a note for myself whether someone made it on time, and that also provides immediate feedback to students whether they've met that deadline. So again, this is one way that I've found to work around the issue that Canvas does not allow you to have multiple deadlines for one assignment. And when you're working with discussions, often you want multiple deadlines. And so by creating these two assignments, I've been able to create a system that hopefully is clear to students and easy to track for me.